Oh, yeah. Here we go. Practice acquisition. There are pitfalls throughout the entire process. If you want to buy a practice, this is how, folks.
Acquisition Unscripted. The truth when buying and selling a dental practice. And now your host, Michael Dinsio.
All right, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Acquisition Unscripted. This is Mike Dinsio, founder and owner of Next Level Consultants, and I'm excited about today's conversation because it's very relevant to the world of, well, where we're at with dentistry. Where high-tech dentistry's in. Older doctors have this kind of hodgepodge system, and you guys buy this practice and you're like, what is happening here? And so again, with 3D printing and CAD cams and scanners and all the things, not to mention HIPAA and all that stuff, software, cloud-based, dentistry is so digital, as you all know more than I do. And that's kind of the discussion today, is all things tech and pitfalls with buying a practice with potentially obsolete gear. And that's what today's episode's about. So I'm lucky to have a friend of mine that I've done a lot of business with over the years, Janz with Cornerstone. He is a badass in the industry, and I rely on him a lot as it relates to all of this stuff. So Jordan, welcome to the show, my friend. How's it going, man?
It's great to be here. It's good to chat with you again, Mike.
I know. So today, again, you already got the intro, and so with that.
We got an Amber alert.
Hey, speaking of technology,
it wouldn't be a live podcast without something in the first couple minutes. I love it.
Exactly. So essentially, I'm gonna mute Jordan for a second as the Amber alert just settles down. So essentially, when I think about an acquisition, I think about like going in and doing that chart audit, and it's the first time that you're getting the opportunity to look at what's in the practice and look under the hood. And it's really important. I think something that gets overlooked is not looking at the system that they currently have. And by the way, pay attention to how slow things are. The reports are being hopefully generated. You're looking at the reports, and they're being batched. And if it takes too long, it's spinning. There could be some red flags there. And so big picture, that's the topic today. So Jordan, now that the Amber alert's over, tell us quickly a little bit about Cornerstone and you and what you guys are all about. And then we'll transition quickly into the topic.
Yeah, absolutely. At a high level, Cornerstone Computer Solutions, our DBA is actually Cornerstone Dental Solutions, because we are specifically a dental IT provider. Company was born in a generic IT firm back in the early 2000s here in Colorado that served small and medium businesses. Cornerstone's been around since 2005. Really, Michael, you already mentioned the technology explosion that really at that time, there were a lot of offices going digital, right? So we had maybe a computer up front turning into a computer in every operatory with intraoral cameras, digital sensors, digital pano, now obviously CBCT, 3D printing. So that IT backbone became, rather than just maybe a new and unique way to manage a schedule, really became the backbone of how a practice functioned. Mm-hmm. And at that time, there are some companies who do it well now, almost 15 years later, but there's a lot of great IT companies out there. Dental IT is kind of its own animal, just because these clients that we work with, they live in and they operate in an environment that not only is constantly changing on the IT side of things, but we're talking about practice management software, imaging software, all of these technology pieces that all need to integrate, all need to talk to each other, and are constantly being updated and changing, right? There's firmware updates, there's software updates on the dental hardware and software side of things, just on the Microsoft or on the Apple iOS system, right? So it's this Rubik's Cube that's kind of always changing, always needing tweaked, monitored, managed. So the whole reason why Cornerstone exists is to hopefully bridge that gap between the technology world, the dental hardware software world. We're not aligned with any dental software, practice management, imaging systems like that. We don't want to sell sensors, cameras, panos, any of that. What our team does is bring us that expertise to say, hey, we can take your network from that techie side of things. Our guys speak that language, but being dental specific, we also speak the language of all your intricate dental hardware, software environment, and bring a solution to make all of that work together and hopefully get clients, their practice managers, folks on their team away from that awful situation of, hey, we've got an IT guy that doesn't necessarily know much about dental who's telling us this. We got dental hardware, software folks telling us this, and now I need to have those two separate worlds speak together. So
it's if you've ever, I want you to imagine a world where you come home from Best Buy and you get a printer for your house and you download it and you get it all figured up and you're following the instructions and the damn thing just won't freaking connect to anything. It says that I should be able to print the picture of my baby girl Charlotte from my phone. That's not working. And it's just a freaking printer. Okay, imagine that times bazillion times in a dental office, and that's Jordan's headache. And so I just, on the most basic level, this kind of stuff really matters. But before we get into kind of like all of that, I want to take it back to acquisition stuff. So Jordan, what's like the number one pitfall in your world, maybe number two, one or two, three, even things that buyers should be buyer beware or concerned about when they go in and they're trying to buy a practice that's a little old or outdated? What are some of those common phone calls you get? Hey, Jordan, I'm buying a practice and I'm not really sure if it's HIPAA or compliant or whatever. Like, what are those big things that our buyers or listeners should be thinking about?
Yeah, that's good. Two things come to mind. Number one is occasionally, and every situation is obviously unique, but a lot of times that we help docs who have acquired a practice, there may be some, we'll call it deferred maintenance on the IT that was part of the acquisition, right? Technology, IT, it's one of those funny things. It's kind of the car cliche, right? As soon as you drive the thing off the lot, the value's gone. It started to age and deteriorate.
Yeah,
it's kind of the same thing in the IT world, right? Things are advancing and changing so quickly. I mean, man, even 10 years ago, the amount of memory, the processing power that was going into these computers, it's a joke now. You can't even buy machines that are that low powered.
And your phone has a bigger one than a laptop did, like whatever years ago.
100%,
right?
100%. Yeah. So not to say that, okay, computers are 1, 2, 3, 4 years old. They're unusable. They need to be ripped and replaced, right? But depending on the situation with the practice that is being acquired, and depending on how that previous doctor was viewing some of those, not only capital expenditures with upgrades of some things that should be upgraded, but also just maintenance, servicing, supporting, updating some of those IT items. Oftentimes there are some red flags there with just getting the network up to a point where it's functional, it's supported, to your point, it's HIPAA compliant and secure in the way that it should be. Because like it or not, that does require both some capital expenditures as well as some ongoing ongoing maintenance costs, just to keep everything supported and updated. So one of the things that I would really encourage docs on the buying side to do is take the time to have a proper network assessment done. We do these a lot of times. I know you've talked about, Mike, on the dental equipment side, right? Kind of get an inventory, understand the lay of the land, be very clear about what you're acquiring. One of the biggest values that Cornerstone offers to buying docs is going into that practice, obviously discreetly. A lot of times it's under the banner of, hey, we're doing a routine network assessment just to make sure everything's looking good on the IT side of things.
And you can do that like acting like you work for the seller. The
for
staff
sure.
wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is
and a lot of times that can be that's weekend, that's over a lunch hour, that's before after patients. Just to, a lot of times those negotiations are still private and happening behind closed doors at that point. So we want to be sensitive of that. But the big value there is to do a top to bottom inventory. To kind of the three buckets that I would put it in are age of the equipment, health of the equipment, and just overall specs, right? So that doc goes into it saying, all right, I understand that these computers were all replaced 2 years ago. Specs are good. They're running Windows 10, Windows 11 professional. Really, there's a lot of life left in these. Or we go in and say, hey, these computers are actually about 10 years old. There are a couple that are still running Windows 8. We would say that this is something, again, not necessarily a day one, but have it on your radar, and even have somebody put a cost proposal together to say, hey, within the next year, within the next couple of years, this is probably something that you should be thinking about. So on that initial side, typically what we do, and would be standard practice for a good solid dental IT company, is to kind of break it down into a red, yellow, green, right? So we go in and say, hey, gosh, this practice, they've got their internet modem. So you've got a Wi-Fi connection, but there's no external firewall, and that's a big HIPAA risk. So from day one, spend $500, spend $700 on this proper enterprise level firewall, get that buttoned up. That's like a red flag you got to have from day one. Maybe in that yellow flag, to extend my example there, to say, hey, the computers, if they're doing what they need to, you can chart, you can do imaging, they're functional now. Understood. There's a lot of costs when you take over a practice, and that may not fall into the day one cost, right? If you've got a doctor op that's pretty painful to operate out of, maybe we upgrade or replace that computer from day one, and then put a plan together to replace or upgrade the rest over the next year, over the next 2 years. But at least have that in your mind, right? To say, okay, if I've got 15 computers that are 8 years old and they're starting to show performance issues or potential hardware failures, I've got a plan on the next, call it $20,000 over the next couple of years to get these things all replaced and restart the clock, right?
I love those
items that we would say, hey, this stuff is good to go, looks healthy. There's no problem with maybe making a few tweaks, folding this under a managed service plan, and servicing and supporting this for many years to come.
I love those tips because I just don't think it's even on most buyers' radar about like a red, green, yellow. Sure. And really just getting an assessment of the severity of a situation. And that's a great service that you offer. I would highly suggest it. It sounded like for you, it was like more of a risk moving, like red, yellow, green, a risk assessment of what are you liable for day one that you acquire this business. I get that there could have been a breach in the past. That's the seller's problem. The day you take it over, you are now liable. And so it sounds like, just from a safety and security situation, a red situation would be you're at great risk here.
Sure.
So that's huge. From a big picture, like just total failure or a replacement situation, a little tip I would give folks is you can always build into an acquisition, purchase, and sale a warranty that the seller gives you on some stuff. Oftentimes that can be a a tricky situation going to the seller saying, hey, dude, like your server is like 20 years old and it's about to explode. And Jordan knows the costs. I do too. There's some pricey tickets. You can always add a warranty to it and say, hey, in the next year, if something implodes, you have to cover it. And by the way, Jordan's quote said this is going to cost you about 15 grand or whatever. So that's super cool. I love that you guys do that assessment. So just in categories, Jordan, you forget the red, green, and yellow. That's great. But categories. So like when you're going through one of those assessments, what's like the steps, like router, server health, like desktop, like what are those categories that you're in simple dummy Dinsio mode here? Just basic stuff here. So like, is it server when there's a server involved? Like, is that like the biggest risk, most expensive thing? Or
yeah, if they've got one, if they're not fully cloud-based, that would definitely have the potential to be a big ticket item. That and let's call it the core network equipment. So the firewall or the security gateway. So that gives practices a secure network, prevents outside forces from gaining unauthorized access to the network. It's a HIPAA compliance thing. You got to check that box, make sure you've got a firewall. Internal wireless would be another one, not only for the practice, but
what's that mean? Wait, what's that mean? Internal wireless?
Yeah, just wireless access, not only for the practice and any devices that tablets, phones, even that they're going to connect wirelessly, but for the practices that want to offer that guest Wi-Fi in their waiting room, that needs to be done in a HIPAA compliant way. Again, it's not an expensive solution. It's just one of those check boxes of let's do this the right way. And then we go down the road of kind of that network performance side of things, right? That silly example would be speed. And you have a complaint of, hey, that computer in Optube, it takes forever to load images. What the heck is going on? Well, that could, if they've got a server, that could be the server, because every computer is pinging that server saying, hey, send me this file, pull up this image. It could be the internal cabling in the walls that's facilitating that connection. Could be the network switch, could be the computer itself, right? So it's important to have an overall map of, hey, here's what we're inheriting. And then taking that map and say, okay, let's come up with a game plan that makes sense cash flow wise to accomplish what I need to get functional and get operating in a reasonable and efficient way and a protected and a secure way, right? Then we can take a look at some of those mid-range to say, hey, we're functional in these areas, but that check-in computer is really heavily used. And it's a speed bump, right? It's a funnel to the practice. So we've got to come up with a solution there. And then you get all the way down to phone system would be a silly one, right? There are a lot of cool options for phone systems now that integrate with practice management software. They can be used as a patient communication tool, soliciting reviews. What's the strategy for using that? I think the other thing that comes to mind in that assessment phase is making sure that the objectives for patient education, patient entertainment can be attained in that space, right? I've seen plenty of network assessments that we've done where the doc worked in a practice, or he has a pretty clear idea. She wants to have a TV mounted on the toe wall to be able to pull images over there. I want a TV in the ceiling with Netflix and Disney Plus and everything for patient entertainment. Depending on the space, depending on what you've got there existing, I'm seeing it less and less now. But every once in a while, I'll still walk into an office that's either not digital or has gone kind of bare bones digital, where they have a laptop that's floating around, and we've got 12 o'clock islands. Right. There's not a clean way to get cabling there. So then the discussion becomes, hey, assuming that you want to go digital from day one, we've either got to talk to a contractor about a little bit of a facelift, a remodel. We've got to look at a wireless solution. We've got to look at if this practice wasn't designed from the architect's plans originally, if this wasn't designed to be digital and have spots for monitors and TVs and computers and USB hubs and all that stuff, what can we make work and what can we fit in this?
What's the plan? Yeah. That's good stuff. To that point, Jordan, let's pivot to like this idea of cloud versus server, because to me this is a very actually let's pause, folks, that we're going to get to that. Little similar but different. I always get the client that's like, oh, we're on Denticon version 1 still, and I don't understand Denticon and whatever. To me, Denticon's not a good example. They're actually decent software, but like some software you've never heard of, like, and it's not even really great digitally and all of that. And so switching softwares day one, I know what that all entails for the team, because I hear it all the time, how difficult it is for the team to deal with new system and all of that. But mechanically and your world, talk to us about switching softwares in general, because I get that a lot in an acquisition.
Yeah, that's a great question. It probably sounds a little bit more daunting and complicated than it really is. A lot of the good solid software vendors out there have it down to a science. What the process looks like, and really for our clients, what they need to plan for is, when is that window of time where all of the information is being converted that I'm not going to have access to it, right? So typically what the process looks like is, we'll say I'm converting from software A to software B. Software B is going to do a test conversion. And I guess backing up a little bit, my advice to anybody considering that is, take the time to do the software demos. Unless you know, hey, this is the software that I'm comfortable with. This is what we're going with. I've used it before. Good to go. It's worth the time to do those demos, especially if you have some experience with different softwares in the past, to really understand. Again, the software companies will overload you with information on features and functions, and it can do this and it can do this. You know how you need to use it, and you know what you need that to look like. So after you choose a lane, in my scenario, software B is going to do a test conversion, they call it. So they take a small sample of the information from practice management software A, put it in their version and say, hey, this is what's going to come over. Are you good with this?
They map it.
Yep. As soon as you have agreement there, say, hey, green light, let's go.
And that's expensive too, by the way.
It can be.
I've seen $2,000 bills for conversion. And by the way, I found that in a lot of ways it didn't map correctly. So that's a sidebar. It's not a perfect science there. Because software B does guarantors and software A doesn't, for example, and that's just like a billing difference. So any tips or tricks on that?
Other than be prepared to embrace some short-term pain for the long-term result? No.
Yes, that's the right advice. That's the right advice.
Yeah. And whatever name we want to assign to a software B is never going to look quite as pretty as their software sales demo tells.
No, exactly.
That's why typically it's standard practice to keep that software A database kind of as a look back for a while, because there is going to be a need for some manual massaging of that information moving forward. But once there's agreement, hey, looks good, we're doing a software conversion. The wild card is how much data, right? It goes really quick if there's 50 gigs of data. It takes a little bit longer if you got a couple terabytes of data in there. So it depends on the size of the practice, patient base, all of that good stuff. But in our scenario, software B would then be able to tell the client, hey, we're going to need 2 days. We're going to need 3 days. And basically, we're going to upload all of this information with help of your IT company. We're going to work on it for a couple days on our end. Your IT company is then going to go to your server, if you have one, and the workstations and install just kind of the base software B, right? Basically set the empty buckets out in the practice, and then work with software B support at filling those buckets with all of the patient data. The wild card, the thing to think about is once that software conversion or once that data upload kicks off at the beginning of that process, anything new that you put into software A isn't going to be uploaded. So depending on what that little window of time is between when software B starts taking that information, they work on it and then put it back into the practice. That little window of time, you need to have a plan for if it's downtime that can be accommodated into a schedule. If it's a weekend thing, great. If it spills over into production days, we've got to think about a strategy for, okay, are we going to still be using software A and then kind of manually put that into software B later? Take a look at that. Are we going to start using software B and treat those patients kind of in the interim as call it new patients that we're going to input there and then backfill everything? So like I said, nothing that can't be solved with good solid support from dental software and IT, but it's one of those things where communication and having the practice, the IT company, and the software vendor all talking, and especially having the technical folks from the IT company and the dental software people talking, that's how you make that conversion successful.
More planning, more conversations, more partnership, more collaboration.
Sure. Yeah.
Back to the printer that doesn't work at home. This is on crack. Scenario.
That sounds personal. I can have one of the guys reach out to you to help with that.
It's very personal. It's very that dang multifunction brother never works right. Yeah. Okay, so along that same lines, I want to talk about like not only switching software, and thank you. That was very detailed and robust. That's great. I also get the whole, hey, our X-ray system isn't really working super well with software B, the new one, and do I got to call the equipment company or the manufacturer on this, all the X-ray stuff? And then there's licensing, from what I understand. So walk us through that, because it's not just software, but there's also all the plugins and stuff of software B, right?
Sure. Absolutely. Yep. And that is always going to be a collaboration between an IT partner and dental software hardware vendors. We're going through a few right now that we're replacing some aging Pano CBCT acquisition computers. And we have a really great relationship with Planmeca support. Those guys are awesome. But it's that collaboration of, hey, there's a firmware upgrade on this ProMax that only you guys can do, but that needs to be done in concert with this new acquisition computer that's being put in, with the new operating system that's on that. So we've got to be working together to all get this done in this couple-hour window on Friday afternoon, so Doc has a perfectly functioning machine come Monday morning patient. So that collaboration and communication is super important.
I'm imagining like a lot of, for the YouTubers watching, a lot of this. It's his fault. It
can be
her fault, because you've got software, hardware, IT company, doctor preference, who's been paid, who hasn't, and something's not working. And everybody's just like, well, that's their fault.
Right.
I mean, I can, is that common?
It certainly can be. I mean, that's at its core, that's the problem that Cornerstone tries to solve every day. We see the issue of practices being caught in the middle there of saying, hey, I went and bought a bunch of computers on eBay, and now I'm having issues connecting my sensors. Or I went to college with this really smart IT guy, and he supports a bunch of law offices and CPAs. So he can he can fix my printers, he can get out all my firewalls and computers and laptops set up, but he doesn't know what a CBCT is or what that looks like.
DEXA
so
sensor.
Then you kind of get that finger pointing of, okay, from the IT side of things, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pass it off to you, talk with whatever dental software, hardware vendors, and if you need anything else from us, let us know.
Yeah.
Then the doctor and office manager is kind of caught in between, right? You've got technical folks over here, technical folks over here. Yeah. They're not talking to each other, and you're relying on someone who probably doesn't have the appropriate skill set to manage that. And quite frankly, whether it's a practice manager, whether it's a doc, they should be doing other things than trying to get IT and Sirona to figure out a solution on a new cone beam, right?
So big picture, and the thing to learn from this conversation is, before you make a hasty decision on switching software, really think through all the players, all the things you want, all the things that are already there, all the solutions and the costs to all of it. Choose a day that you're probably down, or maybe schedule a downtime.
Yep.
Get all the players in the room and just work it out.
Yeah. And every software out there, dental hardware, they will have system requirements that are, most of them are published, very easy for any of us to find. Some of it takes a little bit of digging, but those software hardware vendors, they'll tell you, hey, we need this processor, we need this amount of memory, we need this specific graphics adapter to make all this work well. So that's another opportunity to reference that with the network assessment that was done, right? That can be another example of something that we've run into on that acquisition side, where purchasing doc comes in and says, hey, we're going to be 3D. I'm going to put a Plan Mecha Pro Max right there, and we're going to be doing CBCTs on everybody that comes in. Well, in my scenario, if those computers are the 8-year-old version with no graphics cards, they're not going to support that. No. So that doc needs to have a plan to say, okay, at least my office, maybe a consult, a doctor op, we got to upgrade those machines so that the processor, the memory, the graphics can support the dental technology that I want to use.
Got it. Gosh. Okay. Let's pivot. I did want to cover 2 more topics. We are running out of time, so let's do speed round here.
You got it.
So server versus cloud. And I have this conversation all the time.
Yep.
And I'm just going to lead you a little bit about what I say. You don't have to agree with it, of course, but I'm still a big server guy.
Sure.
Because of all the options I can have and all the different companies I get to shop and use or not use, turn on, turn off. Whereas in the world of cloud, I go to a trade show and I swear to God, there's 17 cloud software companies walking around pitching me this perfect situation. And so, like, I think my clients, listeners, I'm sure you too, get really confused about this topic. And I just want to set it straight as a neutral party. Jordan, you install this stuff all the time. Unlock or debunk this whole idea. What's the pros? What's the cons? I know you can't really do that in the speed round, but try.
Yeah, it's good. I'll go as quick as I can. It's a big topic. It's a good question. What it boils down to is either option. There's a place for both. Either option, there is physical hardware, a physical server with your software on it. In a cloud-based scenario, you're paying via your cloud vendor. You're paying for the convenience of somebody else hosting that in a server farm, and you don't have a physical box in your office with your data that you need to manage. You need to replace every 4, 5, 6 years. So there's some advantages there. The reason why typically cloud-based softwares are more expensive on a month-to-month basis than server-based softwares is everybody collectively is taking part in the cost to replace those servers when they go down, maintain them, update them, service them. That's just happening offsite instead of onsite. Mm-hmm. I will say for cloud-based, one of the big advantages is for docs who are multi-site, and especially docs who have a patient base that has some flow between locations, that they don't necessarily operate as islands. So if I've got practice A, practice B, practice C, it's very easy in a cloud environment to either have an overall database with clinics, parceled out between those. The visibility is a little bit easier than the old school remoting in. Still possible to do it that way, but there are some advantages to the cloud when it comes to multi-location and just offsite access, right?
How difficult is it to go? So if you're, I mean, there's high 90%. We all start out at single practice.
Sure.
And I hope that you get to the point where the first practice is so easy that you want to do a second. That's a big, I hope, for you, because most people don't go multiple practice, but that their vision is to do that. And so they might be choosing cloud because they're like, I'm going to do a second office in 2 years. Well, that usually doesn't happen. I guess it's probably not that difficult to flip over to cloud, and that's similar conversation that we just had.
Yeah, that's that software conversion that we just talked about. Certainly can be done.
So I just have found that it's more expensive just in general with cloud because they bake all these services in. Text message, merchant service fees are crazy on those. Forms, online scheduling, all these things are baked into one cloud version, and choosing software that is still, I still find that Open Dental's the winner right now as far as statistics. Are you finding the same thing?
We work with a lot of practices that are going the Open Dental route for sure.
Why is that the clear winner between the big three? I call them.
Yeah. Couple factors I think driving that. The entry point cost wise is really aggressive, so that's a differentiator for sure. It plays nicely with a lot of different dental software hardware options being open source. It's less restrictive with sensors, cameras, imaging softwares. It's pretty accessible. You're exactly right, Mike. Some of the cost drivers for cloud-based are, like I said, you're paying for the convenience of not having that server in your IT closet, right? Mm-hmm. So you're going to pay a premium for that. Mm-hmm. The other maybe a little bit hidden item that I always like to bring up is that if you're cloud-based and your internet goes down, that's like your server going down, because right. your software is in a server farm in Florida or Minnesota or who knows where it is. If your internet connection goes down, again, there are some failover ways to do it, but it gets costly to do so. So a lot of our cloud-based practices are fiber internet as opposed to coax internet, which, without going down a longer explanation there, fiber is typically quite a bit more expensive. So there's some baked in operating costs that come with higher software costs, higher internet costs that you don't have from the server side of things. On the server side of things, the reason why that is still pretty popular in our dental world is it's definitely, again, without painting too broad of a brush here, definitely under a $10,000 expenditure for a proper server for the vast majority of practices. I would say in that $5,000 to $10,000. Again, conservatively, probably plan on that thing lasting 5 years. So it's a bigger CapEx up front, but you can get away with paying a little bit lower internet bill because all of your computers are hardwired to that server in your IT closet. If your internet goes down, you're still able to pull up patients, you're still able to take images, you're still able to function. And the monthly cost, we would still definitely advocate having a monthly support contract with that dental software vendor, just because that's what gives you access to updates when they come out, patches when they come out, support if and when we need it. So still a good idea to do that, but it's a lot less because all you're doing is paying for support and not some of those extras that you had mentioned, right?
This plays right into my last topic, and that is the world of software now is just a beast. Like maybe it's because I'm all in it now in the consulting world. And I didn't realize this when I was a banker, but it just feels like, gosh, like when I review a lot of profit and losses, like that's, I do that a lot. And again, back to the server cloud, I've seen $20,000 a year software cloud options because that's just what it is. $15,000-$20,000 just in cloud services. But that does include all those patient experience things, text, merchant services, you name it. So it's got all that stuff baked in. Whereas you go server, like we just talked about, you still have a lot of those needs. You want to text, and you still need merchant services. You still need forms. So you still have that. So software in general, server or cloud, is now just like a beast in itself. And
Sure.
on the startup podcast, I always talk about, like, let's not get crazy with that. You still can be a human being and pick up the phone and verify patients' insurances and not use all of this software. Acquisition, they have a little bit more money to play with because it's an acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
But still, like, Jordan, software. I mean, holy crap. I don't know what my question is other than, holy crap, like, this game of software is nuts. Do you have any comments on software?
Well, and you mentioned as well, I mean, you go to any trade show and it's 20 new software companies, right, that have the latest and greatest.
Oh, we can do this. Oh, we can do this. And this is integrated, and this, and this. It's like, what? Or we're trying to, like, eliminate the persons that work in our dental office.
Well, the way to think about that as well, and it's a really good comment on your end, is you have to think about the staff training as well. So for some of these, if you're looking at Open Dental, at Dentrix, something like that, anybody with experience that you're going to bring on to your team has probably worked with those softwares before.
Yeah.
Some of these random ones that we see, they can do some great things, but have the understanding going into it that every hygienist, every assistant, every office manager, every reception team member that you bring in, you're going to need to invest a lot of money on training them because they're not going to have worked with that software before. If they've been in the dental industry for a good amount of time, they've worked at a practice that's used Open Dental. They've worked at a practice that's used EagleSoft or Dentrix, and it may not be the current version. You can get them up to speed quickly. Mm-hmm. If you go too far off the wall with some of that stuff, you will be training and retraining every single team member that you hire.
It's so true, because even the folks that have experience with Dentrix, I mean, Dentrix is the big boy, right? Sure. Most people have worked in Dentrix, to your point, but even those folks don't even use Dentrix correctly, and they have experience with Dentrix.
Right.
So like you go to the trade show or you do a demo, and look at all these cool things you can do. Well, your team is probably going to only execute 10% of all that stuff because they can't even run Dentrix correct.
Right.
Right?
That's the dirty little secret of it, right?
It's true.
And maybe some of the shots taken at Open Dental are, it may not be as robust as another option. Say, well, I'm still only going to use 50% of what Open Dental can do.
Exactly.
So I'm okay using that as opposed to 20% of what another one can do because this serves my needs.
There's just something to be said for simplicity actually is more effective. And don't get me wrong, there is some cool stuff like software like Swell is one that it gets more Google reviews. I'm going to have Swell on. I'm going to write that down. I got to get Swell on because they somehow do execute more Google reviews than the others. There's Medento and Flex and this and that. And it's just like the big one, again, I keep mentioning is merchant services. It's amazing. Making a decision about software can cost you so much in something like merchant services, because merchant services is very expensive if you don't negotiate it and ask and figure out what that software's fees are versus just going straight up with dental card services, which I'm going to interview here soon. And they're really cheap. And so like integration and ease of use is very expensive if you don't pay attention to the details. So well, we covered so much. I appreciate your energy and your time and your knowledge and all the tidbits. I do want to give people access to Jordan Janz. So that description, just like always, Jordan's going to send me your stuff. Make sure you do that, Jordan, and I can get it below in the description. Reach out, ask him the questions. He knows a lot about this stuff, clearly. Any last minute comments or questions, concerns, things that you want to say about Cornerstone?
Yeah, I think the important thing in everything that we talked about, right, is the docs are the hero of the story. Bring in some trusted guides who have been there before, right? Mm-hmm. Take the time to do the software demos before finalizing the decision. Take some time to have the dental equipment evaluated before that purchase. Take some time to have that IT network evaluated and have a conversation to say, hey, here's what we saw. Here are some things from day one that you need to be prepared. There's $10,000 worth of upgrades that, to be compliant, to be secure, to be functional and efficient in what you're going to do, you got to plan that into your budget. And then here's some long-term things to be aware of, right? And I think that's what you've done, Mike, such a great job of, is being that trusted guide of saying, hey, you're the hero of the story. We're going to get you there. But there's some information that you don't have now that is going to be really important that you have before you make some of these important decisions. So let's lean on some people who have done it before.
Yeah, exactly.
Give you the right information so you can make the best decision, not only for tomorrow, for your practice, for getting up and running, but with an eye towards where you want to go.
I love that, buddy, because as a team, as a collective group of advisors, it's super important. Folks that don't trust your advisors, that's a big miss, a huge miss. I always say, like, one of my biggest assets is the people that I know, because I don't know everything. Jordan knows a lot about what he does. So-and-so knows a lot about this and that. And so there's a lot of stuff that you got to figure out. There also is paralysis by analysis. That's a real thing. And that's why you do want to trust your advisors. It's like, hey, shoot me straight, Jordan. Like, why? What would you do? If you're my brother, what would you tell me? Right. And trust that, because there's zero reason for Jordan to lead you the wrong way. Zero motivation there. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. I didn't think an IT episode would go 47 and counting. But we did cover a lot of stuff. We did. I'll leave you with this story. I just did a chart audit a few weeks ago. We're in the middle of that deal still. And I'm trying to generate the reports. And oh my gosh, it's spinning. I'm trying to batch the reports, because we're in the middle of a chart audit. That's what you do. You pull reports, and it's just taking forever. And I'm like, holy cow. So I open up the Windows. I take a picture of it's Windows 10. And I'm just like, gosh, something's got to be going on here. And I look down, and on the doctor's desk, the seller doctor's desk, is a quote for a new server, right? And I'm like, well, hey, Mr. Buyer or my client, it's like, they obviously know this is a problem because they've quoted a server. So just, we're going to
let the buyer deal with that one.
Oh, it was just so clearly you need a new server. I think the due diligence is over. So it's just funny. Be perceptive at the chart audits, because you'll pick up a lot.
Yeah.
But Jordan, thanks so much for your time, brother. Thanks again for being a good friend and resource. Appreciate you.
Thank you, buddy.
All right, buddy. See you later.
Tune in next time for another truth-filled episode of Acquisition Unscripted. We want to hear from you. Interact with your host, Michael Dinsio. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Comment and subscribe.